For all of his charisma as a leader, his skills as a diplomat, his savvy as a politician, Moses was not the sort for whom making speeches ever came easily. Rhetoric simply wasn't included on his resume, public speaking never being one of his fortes, and of course, back at Sinai before the improbable pilgrimage began, he had admitted as such to Yahweh. "Oh, my Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor now that you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue." Exodus 4, verse 10. The Almighty, however, assured Moses that he would be provided with words, which may be the reason he rarely seemed to be at a loss for them any time thereafter. Indeed, his final address to the Israelites, from which our scripture lesson is taken, rambles on for some 30 chapters. But I dare say, even if Moses were a polished orator, this message would have been a rather difficult one to deliver. If you will, it is the retirement sermon of a pastor who has devoted the last third of his life to a single parish of people, encouraging them when they were downhearted, chastising them when they were hard-hearted, consoling them when they were broken-hearted. No doubt, his prior experience as a shepherd proved advantageous. Despite their constant complaining and wandering loyalties, Moses had still somehow managed to herd these stiff-necked Hebrews across the desert with an almost equally stubborn resolve, accommodating their needs and arbitrating their disputes every step of the way. And now here they are poised on the east bank of the Jordan, anxiously awaiting their chance to enter into the promised land. Sadly, Moses will not be accompanying them. By divine decree, he is to stay behind so that his words may be sent ahead. But strangely enough, though the prophet is center stage throughout, the text offers no voice for the poignant soliloquy of competing emotions which must have swirled within him. You can only guess at what he was feeling, and even Moses himself might not have been entirely sure. All the same, when Joshua finally approaches, it isn't hard to imagine the old leader standing there, lost in thought. For a while, the two of them survey the horizon, quietly taking in the view. One of them will complete this journey. The other will not. And I suppose little else really needs to be said. Eventually, though, I picture Joshua resting a hand on his mentor's shoulder and whispering, "The people are ready. Everyone is here just as you asked." Reluctantly, Moses nods. Like it or not, the moment he had so hoped to avoid has now arrived, walking back to where the Israelites have gathered. Moses employs a large rock to serve as makeshift pulpit. With staff in hand, he draws a deep breath and begins to preach. "This entire commandment that I command you today, you must diligently observe, so that you may live and increase and go in and occupy the land that the Lord promised on oath to your ancestors." Deuteronomy 8, verse 1. There is a sagacious, almost prophetic quality in his voice, like a grandfather cradling a child upon his lap. Moses carefully reviews all that has transpired over the last 40 years, reminding the people that it was Yahweh who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, who led you through the great and terrible wilderness and arid wasteland with poisonous snakes and scorpions. Deuteronomy 8, 14b through 15a. It is an eloquent recitation of the Almighty's achievements, to be sure, but you have to admit that, at least initially, it seems a rather interesting choice of subjects for a farewell sermon. I mean, here the Israelites are preparing for a new life. However, instead of setting their sights toward the future, Moses appears more interested in dwelling on the past. Of course, it could be that he's simply reminiscing about everything which they have encountered together, having reached 60 in years. It's certainly understandable that he might be so inclined, especially at a moment like this. In fact, given the circumstances, you can hardly blame Moses for wanting to rummage through the files a bit. After After all, who among us has not done the same? Who among us has not dreamed of days gone by as we floated lazily down the river of nostalgia? It's quite common, perfectly normal, basically harmless. Granted, with the passing of time, our strolls along memory lane tend to become somewhat idealistic. When my cousin and I were kids, for example, we used to spend the summer evenings out on the front porch listening to my grandfather recall his childhood. We'd sit there with wide eyes, enthralled by his every word, and even though we knew that his grandmother sat next to him spinning one yarn after another, the truth was often being stretched in the process. To hear my grandfather tell it, he went to school 12 months a year, made straight A's, walked 10 miles to get there, snow up to his elbows, both ways, uphill, and this was in Texas. That didn't matter. We delighted in hearing his stories all the same. The clothes on your back did not wear out, and your feet did not swell these 40 years, Moses declares. Really, not a single blister in such an arduous trek through the rocky desert. I dare say the garments of the children must have grown right along with them. It sounds like an entry from Ripley's Believe It or Not, or at the very least, a candidate for the Guinness Book of World Records. Still, we know how memory works. It leaks, it wanders, it has gaps here and there. And so, it's easy enough to forgive Moses for these few recollections which seem to have taken on a rosy tint. Besides, the old prophet may well have had a hidden agenda in wanting the Israelites to recall their past in this fashion. There is, after all, an ironic, guarded, almost, haven't you noticed, tone to his speech. Remember the long way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness. Moses tells the people, in order to humble you, testing to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep the Lord's commandments, God humbled you by letting you hunger, then by feeding you with manna, with which neither you nor your ancestors were acquainted, in order to make you understand that one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Or to put it another way, merely providing for the Hebrew survival until safely arriving in the promised land was not Yahweh's only objective. There had been lessons for Israel to learn as they wandered across the desert, and in a sense, they are now about to embark upon their final exam. How will they handle this gift of a homeland? Will they take the Almighty's blessing for granted, or give credit where credit is due? Will they live by their own wits, or by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord? Perhaps Moses is simply reviewing the coursework of the past 4 decades, and like a speaker at commencement ceremony, reminding the graduating class of the value of their education. Take care that you do not forget the Lord your God, and begin exalting yourselves, he tells them. For none of this has come of your own doing. It could be that by focusing so intently on their past, Moses actually wants the Israelites to realize anew the gifts of the present. Because when you think about it, we don't really understand our experiences, much less appreciate them, until we look back. Imagine, let's say, that you travel to Europe or someplace exotic. With camera in hand, you start clicking pictures, roll after roll, or digital picture after digital picture. And upon returning home, you promptly invite a few unsuspecting friends over for dinner. There on the table sit the reels of slides, all 9 of them. Want to see our vacation? You ask nonchalantly, as if the idea had just occurred to you. Well, I don't know, your guests reply with hesitant trepidation. Oh my, look at the time, honey. Honey, it's already 7:30. You know, we've got to places, we've got to, nonsense, you insist. Sit down, this will be fun. About the 3rd reel, your poor friends have discreetly nodded off on the sofa, and who is still captivated by the slides? Well, you are. Because in a way, you are taking the trip all over again. And for that matter, enjoying it even more now that you are reminiscing together. Sometimes I think it is only in recalling our experiences that we begin to appreciate them. 24 years ago, I stood with my partner. If the truth be told, I was so nervous. I was shaking like a wet dog. The minister began to intone those solemn words, "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here." And the whole time I was thinking, am I standing in the right place? Who's got the ring? Is he talking to me? What was the question? I think I'm going to faint. In a word, I was a wreck. Absolutely clueless as to the magnitude of the commitment that I was making. In plenty and in want, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, as long as we both shall live, I whispered with naive certainty. And I spent the next 16 years recalling what I promised that day and appreciating more with each passing one what is actually entailed in those two tiny words, "I do." Indeed, appreciating it even more so the last 8 years since he passed. Part of understanding the journeys we're on, it seems to me, is being able to retrace our steps. After all, you will never know how far you've come if you can't recall where you've been. And maybe that's what Moses is doing here, encouraging the people to recall the many blessings they have witnessed together. Take care that you do not forget the Lord your God, he tells the Israelites. For it was Yahweh who brought you to this place. It's almost as if he is inviting them to step from the present into the past and relive the events of the Exodus. Because in a sense, that's what happens when we recall our experiences. We travel back and move through them again. I recently spent an afternoon with an older couple I know. Upon entering their house, I noticed a gold plaque prominently displayed on the wall, which read, "In honor of Bill and Betty, on the occasion of their 50th wedding anniversary." We were all enjoying a glass of lemonade when I happened to comment. "It's a nice plaque." "Yeah, our kids gave that to us," they replied, beaming with pride. 50 years is a long time, I said. "You must have a lot of memories." Bill reached over to take Betty's hand. "You know, Bishop, I can still recall the first time I laid eyes on this woman." She began to blush. "I was registering for classes at the University of Texas." He went on to explain, "This pretty gal was sitting behind the desk, and I have to tell you, I was smitten, right then and there." Betty smiled, and they looked into each other's eyes. And they were gone. I mean, I could have gotten up and started vacuuming the carpet, and they wouldn't have even known I was in the room. I wasn't sure if they were ever going to snap out of it. In recalling the experience, they were reliving that moment, stepping from the present back into the past. And perhaps such is Moses' strategy as well, to allow the people to prepare for the promises of the future by helping them first to recall the blessings of their past. Still, I can't help thinking there's more to it than that. Because if you read the text closely, what Moses is asking of the Israelites is that they remember Yahweh's blessings, not just recall them. We often use the words interchangeably, I'll admit, but it seems to me that there's a difference between the two. Because when we recall an event, we step from the present back into the past. However, to remember is to move in the opposite direction. It is the summoning of the past into the present. Don't you fall asleep on me. Some time ago, for instance, I found myself counseling a woman struggling with the painful decision of whether or not to move into a nursing home. Her husband had died 2 years earlier, but not an hour went by that she did not think of him. In fact, at one point, during our conversation, she leaned toward me. She leaned toward me and confided, "You know, when I remember Eugene, it's like he's here with me. I can see him sitting over in that old chair, pretending to read the newspaper when I know perfectly well he's really taking a nap. I'll watch a funny show on television and I could almost hear him laughing. Sometimes, Reverend, I even talk to him out loud. I'll say, it's a beautiful morning, isn't it? Or I'll ask him, what should I do? Most days I'm the only one here, but somehow when I remember Eugene, it's like I'm not the only one here. Does that seem strange?" "No," I whispered, "because that's what happens when we remember. You see, remembering is more than simply letting your thoughts drift back in time. For, in a way, remembering actually transcends time. At the Last Supper, as you well know, when our Lord gathered his disciples together, he instructs them, 'Do this in remembrance of me.' Now, obviously, he wasn't asking them merely to recall the event. Well, I think he broke the bread like this, and I'm pretty sure he held the cup in his left hand. No, of course not. Holy Communion has never meant a nostalgic stroll down memory lane. We celebrate communion in order to remember Christ. Because in the breaking of the bread and the sharing of the cup, he is here with us. That's what remembering is all about. Summoning the past into the present. When you have eaten your fill, Moses tells the children of Israel, and have built fine houses and live in them, and when your herds and flocks have multiplied, and your silver and gold is multiplied, and all that you have multiplied, do not say to yourself, my power and the might of my own hand have gotten me this wealth. But remember the Lord your God, for it is the Almighty who gives you the power to get wealth." Deuteronomy chapter 8. Do you see what Moses is doing? He is encouraging the people to remember Yahweh, to invite into their midst the same God who brought them this far, to bind them together from here on, to allow the same God who once offered them help to provide them now with hope, to call upon the same God who gathered them from Pharaoh's labor to guide them into the promised land. Remember the Lord your God, says Moses. It's more active than reminiscing. It's more urgent than recalling. Here, Israel is being asked to remember, to bring into the present the blessings of their past. So they get here at 6 because they knew the service started at 5, so they all think it'll be over by 6. See, they think that they don't have to listen to anything about me, right? That's what they do. I know what you do. I got you covered. I got you covered. Don't take that long to get here from Fort Worth. I may have been born at night, but I wasn't born last night. Today, of course, is Thanksgiving. Like no other time of year, airports and highways will be flooded with a steady stream of travelers eager to return home. We have already, or some of us are still planning, to gather amidst family and friends at tables laden with food. The nation has paused to remind itself of benefits forgotten. Churches have discarded the competitive spirit and joined together in ecumenical services of worship. Soup kitchens have opened their doors, prepared a banquet for the people of the street. And the more reflective among us, rich and poor alike, perhaps stayed or will stay a while after the meal in order to gain some distance, to consider the countless blessings bestowed, to lament relationships neglected, and to make silent vows of adjusted priorities. It is above all else a time both fitting and right to give God thanks and praise. And part of what that requires is that we recall the heavenly mercies we have each received. For some of you here, those mercies have come gift-wrapped in the smile of a newborn child. For others, in the healing touch of an unseen hand at the hospital bedside. For some of you, those mercies have been so obvious and overwhelming that there was little doubt that Almighty had spoken. For others, there were only whispers of a still, small voice, deep within, which somehow gave you the strength to keep going. For some of you, those mercies may have changed the course of your life, sending you off in a different direction. For others, they have simply confirmed a journey started long ago and offered the assurance that you do not walk alone. Thanksgiving is a day in which we give thanks to God for such mercies. But if I may, I would like to invite you to do more today than just recall them. I want to encourage you to remember those mercies, to allow the same God who has so richly blessed us in the past to draw near enough to bless us even now. For gratitude is the remembering of what the Lord has already done. And mark this, in our remembering, the Almighty is able to do it again. Take care that you not forget the Lord your God, Moses tells the Israelites, for it is Yahweh who has brought you to this place. Such, I suppose, could be said for each of us as well. Okay, then. It's time to make the crossing and continue on with the journey. There are people here who need your concern and compassion. There's a community out there There's a community out there which needs to be nourished by the good news of the Gospels. There's a world in need of your prayers and the promise of our Savior, Jesus Christ. So carry on. Live simply. Love generously. Speak truthfully. Serve faithfully. Pray daily. And leave the rest to God. For the same one who has led us this far leads us still. Remember that. Above all, remember that. Amen. Rather than being petty.
Agreed. Let's see.
First of all, let's stop for a second. Just stop for a second. I want to go around the room very quickly. And I want everybody to tell me one thing. It doesn't have to be the most thing. It doesn't have to be the best thing. It doesn't have to be anything. One thing that you are thankful for today.
All right. I'm thankful for artichoke dip.
Okay?
For my cats.
You're thankful for your cats.
I'm thankful that I had the means to go and get the ingredients to prepare it. I'm happy I had the root to prepare a dish under, and that we are able to do this.
And hopefully we are grateful as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Steve.
Aren't you taking a liking to me right now?
You're thankful for that. Are you really thankful for that, though?
Yes. I am. Able to be here another day, right?
I'm not worried about that.
Okay.
My concentration is on you guys right now. Okay. I'm thankful for each and every one of you for being here. Late or not, good voices or not.
Sorry. I'm not a singer. Like,
I wasn't talking about you. Listen to him. I already admitted he was the bad voice over there. I'm talking about Lurch over there. Look, like I said last week. Look, he gave me this voice, so this is what he's getting praised with. So, he's getting, God, here you go. There you go. It's, double-edged sword there, right? Look, gratitude is something that so easily given, and we so easily forget, but means so very much to everybody. I mean, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to sit up here in these funny little clothes, hot as they may be, as stressed out as I get during the times that we're trying to get ready, to share with you my experiences, my background, my whatever, my memories, and study with you the Bible and discern what we want to keep and what we want to file away somewhere for a little later. Right? God gave us brains for a reason.
Amen to that.
I'm thankful for, even though I don't say it, and I may not express it, thankful for every single day and every single breath that I'm still here. There are days that I wonder. And there are days that I wonder why I'm still here and others aren't. And Patsy said that to me today too. She said she wonders why she's still here and others aren't. She's almost 91 years old. I'll tell you why. You're not done.
Indeed.
So, as we've gotten through that, you had something you wanted to say.
I forgot.
Maybe. Come on.
No, I literally forgot.
So let's talk about it. Thanksgiving. What does it mean? Why do we do it? I mean, obviously we're talking about a couple of different things here. We're talking about, the Thanksgiving of the Pilgrims coming into the whole thing, and we all know that story, right? And there's a lot of controversy with that as well. You talk about the Indians and, the way that the Indians were treated by colonial Americans, and it wasn't good. But we talked today in the story about Moses, in the sermon about Moses and his final, basically, goodbye speech to the Israelites as they were about to go into the Promised Land. What river was that they crossed?
Jordan.
Good. Good. What do you think of that? What do you think of the fact that Moses was trying to conjure up the past there? What do you think he was doing? What do you think was going on there? Huh? Go ahead.
Nothing.
No, please, Gavin. Tell me your thoughts. You're always the gift of gab.
Yes, but what I have to say is not appropriate.
Okay. Time and place for everything, right?
Yeah.